Fearless.
Chase.
Bold.
Following.
Courageous.
Search. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Marshall.
And this is
Undaunted
Pursuit. All right, there we go. Hey guys, welcome back to Undaunted Pursuit podcast. I'm glad you're here. And guess what? Marshall finally made it back on.
I made it back, y'all. Made it. I survived the storm. Pun intended.
Man, that took incredibly too long, didn't it?
Man, we were working that storm for 2 weeks straight. Every day. I had 1 day off during that whole time. That was Memorial Day. And that's only because I said no, because I needed 1 day to relax and for my wife and I to go spend some. So that day we went to the movie theater and we watched a movie together and we had lunch together or dinner or something. I just had to get away and spend time with her and then just relax because my goodness, it was from 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. some mornings and 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. some days on the weekends, just working all day long, 16-hour days. And it's good. Yeah, I'm definitely thankful for it, but it was a lot. It was definitely a lot, but yeah, we made it through it. So here we are today. So yeah, I've been out and about. I've been missing being here.
Right. Well, we've cruised on without you.
Guys. I know it. Just moving right along.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not bad, but you did end up missing a pretty good podcast with Barry Mossop. He was fun to talk to, and have no fear, we'll have him on again in the very near future for some interesting conversation. I mean, he wants to get into. There's some stuff that we can get into with him that's out there, you know.
Yeah, I was listening. I went back and listened to that podcast, bits and pieces of it, just to kind of see what all you guys were talking about, and it sounded pretty interesting. Gotta love the Canadian accent.
Right.
It's not something you hear every day. So hearing on the podcast was fun. Seemed like a pretty cool guy. So looking forward to having him on again. We've also, in the not too far away future, we have another special guest coming on. I know we're both looking forward to that. He's a funny guy.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a comedian. But I won't say too much because I don't want to give it away. But he's going to be fun. He's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yep. And let's see here. Shoot, man, I don't know that we have any other guests lined out in the near future other than him. I know I reached out to one of somebody else, but I can't remember. I don't know. Either way. But so today, or this week's episode is just kind of off the cuff, I guess, because we just didn't. Yeah, we were going to get into, and I know that I promised everybody that we would get into this whole judgment thing and Bema Seat and all that this week, but I didn't realize that Christian was leaving town, and it's a good one to get in with him because, well, he's the one that brought it up. So, you know, but we're going to come up with something. We've got something we can talk about. Have you been working on anything? I've been incredibly busy. So, Marshall, I have, I'm sure it's safe to say at this point in time that I am going back to school. And so I'm going through Bible college and for some sort of credentialing, whatever that may look like. Right now, it's just classes. So that's taken up a lot of time. And then we've been doing a discipleship training at church or class or however you want to look at it. Either way, that's been incredibly good. Funny thing about that is that discipleship has been kind of our topic this whole year so far, because it's just so important. And I think we're going to continue with that theme even today a little bit. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about some other stuff too, but yeah. So, I mean, God's word. Hey, man,
which
that's
is
what I want to do. That's what I've been asking God for.
which is funny. It's funny seeing Aaron go back to school. Okay, I went back to school. I got my associates in industrial automation like 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's been a while. And then I'm going to be working here pretty soon. When I decide to finally pull the trigger and start putting it off, I'm going to get my bachelor's in occupational safety and health. But it's funny hearing Aaron say he's going back to school, because Aaron has always been the exact opposite. Like, I don't need school. I don't want to go to school. School's not for me. He was that guy.
Yeah.
And nothing wrong with that, because school is not for everybody. I don't like school. Only reason why I'm doing it is because I know it can help my future, and help my family, and so that's the only reason why I'm going to do it. But it's just, I think it's awesome. I'm proud of you,
Yeah.
Aaron, for doing that and listening to God and what He has. It's cool seeing what He's doing in your life, because I've been through a discipleship program many years ago with our old associate pastor at an old church we used to go to in Fort Worth, Texas. My wife and I did. Him and his wife did it, and my wife
Mm-hmm.
went through it with his wife, and I went through it with him. And so it's just kind of funny, here you are going through a discipleship program, and here you are in school now. So it's cool. It's cool.
Well, and that it's all from the Lord.
Yeah.
He's been pressing on my heart to do it, and I've been so adamantly against it. Especially
Mhm.
this late in life. But hey, I'm going to give it a go at least, and try it, and we'll see
And
where
there's nothing
God
wrong with
takes it.
that. There's nothing wrong with going to school later in life. I think a lot of people get that mentality that, oh, you should go to school right out of college, right out of high school. Go to college out of high school. And yeah, it's easier that way. Don't get me wrong. A lot of stuff is fresh on your mind when you take 20, 25 years after school, after high school, to go to college. It
Right.
can be easier for me. For me, going back to school was so much easier later in life, because I did go to school not too
Yep.
long after high school. About a year after high school, I went to a community college up in Missouri. I started it, and then
Mm-hmm.
life happened, and I didn't go back because life happened, and then I got back into it. But I was a lot more prepared mentally, and I was a lot more determined uh, to go to school and to finish schooling, because I had a good reason to do it, and a good I wasn't just doing it for myself. I was doing it for my family. Because at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, what you're doing, it just doesn't affect you, right? It's going to affect your wife and your kids and everything. And especially if you're doing what
Yeah.
God's placed on your heart. And I was thinking about um, how I was like, it's so cool. So like my cousin Nathan, he is a pastor. He went
Mm-hmm.
through a Bible college, got his bachelor's degree, did all that stuff. We're going to have him on here soon too, because his testimony is amazing. Um, he
Yeah, for
just
sure.
he went from being an alcoholic to being a pastor. It's insane.
Dang.
But his testimony is amazing. And honestly, he's the last guy I would have ever thought would have been a pastor. But God does amazing things. But um, when you told me that you're going to school, uh, Bible college and stuff, I was like, man, I wonder if that's something I should do. I should look into. Maybe I should, you know, uh, pursue being a pastor one day, or just getting those credentials. So if I decide to do it or help out more, I can do that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, here's the deal. Um, whether you have that kind of a degree or not, whether you have any schooling or not, God's going to use me, whether I'm a pastor at a church
Mm-hmm.
or whether I'm a electrical designer working for the company I work for. Um, I see opportunities every day. I told you, Aaron, I think it was last Friday, I met one of my customers out in the field outside, and I met him on his property. And um, before I got there, this was like just right down the road. I didn't pray this, but I thought this to myself. It was just a
Mm-hmm.
thought. I thought, God, just give me an opportunity to witness to somebody. Is more or less what I was just. It was just a thought. And lo and behold, the guy that I met, he had been going through a lot. His mother had just passed away, and so he was just in a really crappy place, And
Yeah.
at the end of our conversation and our meeting, I just said, "Hey, are you a Christian? He was like, what? He didn't really hear me. I just said, do you mind if I pray for you? And he's like, yeah, he said, it's sad. You see, it seems like everybody's trying to take God out of the world. And I said, well, I'm here to put God back into the world. And so we prayed.
Yeah.
And afterwards he said, thank you. And the sincereness on his face, and you could see the sincereness in his eyes. It was just, you could tell he's very thankful for that. So the opportunity is right in front of us all the time to be God's disciples and to be God's witnesses, and to just do whatever it is he wants us right where you are, right where you work at. He can use us no matter what you're doing in life. So I just want to say that because I think it's important.
Yeah.
I think people, including myself, get caught up in, well, I'm not a pastor, or well, I'm not this, or well, I'm not that. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're a disciple of Christ. And like he said on that mountain, he said, go into all the world and spread the gospel. Well, here we are. So anyway, I've been going on long enough.
That's what we're doing. Well, no, you're touching on what we're actually going to be talking about this week a little bit, or at least something that I brought up to you in coming out of James, and we'll get there. But yeah, you're just doing what you're supposed to do. It's just what's supposed to. But I opened up my Bible here to Proverbs, my favorite verse. Of course, we've talked about it on here, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of repetitive things that we're going to say that we've probably said on many other episodes. But here's the thing: Proverbs 16:9. A man's mind plans his way as he journeys through life, but the Lord directs his steps and establishes them. That's exactly what we're talking about here. I had this idea in my head that, well, I'm too old to go back to school. Marshall, you have all these grand plans of doing this and that, getting there in a job, as of most of our listeners do. We all have dreams and aspirations to do something with our lives.
Sure.
From a worldly standpoint.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what it boils down to is God establishes our steps. And that's exactly what he's doing. Where I thought that I was good and set to go, and here I am in a job, and like a lot of people find themselves in a dead-end job. I'm not saying that my job is a dead-end job, but they just don't think they can go any further. Well, that's the reason why I love this verse so much, is because no, sky's the limit when it comes to God. He can do and accomplish anything in your life. So as long as you press into him, he will press into you, regardless of whether or not you're pressing into him. He's pressing into you and directing every step. Every good thing comes from the Lord. So that being said, that's kind of where we're going tonight.
Well, and all of this has to do with our faith, right? Our trust and our faith in Jesus. I've got this little deal here. It says, faith in God is trust in him, based on a true understanding of who he is, as revealed in the Bible. Faith in God involves an intellectual assent to the facts concerning God and a life-changing reliance on those facts. I've got more, but I'm going to wait.
Well, okay. All right. Well, and here's the thing. Here's a little comedic relief to break up the seriousness of this week's podcast, is that, I have to go back to school, Marshall. You know why? Because I have got to be knowledgeable enough to do this podcast, or we have to be knowledgeable enough to do this podcast without the use of my phone, because I'm too stubborn to get a webcam for my computer, and so I've been using my cell phone as a webcam right now. So when I come onto these podcasts, these past several podcasts for like the past month or so, hey, I'm without any way to look this up, because if I try and look this up on the computer that I'm using I almost need two computers, Marshall. I need one to look things up, and I need one because if I interrupt this recording or minimize it, it messes everything up. For whatever reason, I don't know. But even if I was to plug in a mouse to be able to use a mouse in this computer, not that it's a bad computer, but it's just I'm afraid of messing up our recording. So So this is just, as I've said on here before, all these thoughts, especially tonight when we do these episodes where we just kind of wing it, they're just kind of thoughts, from daily listening to sermons, daily reading scripture, daily praying, and just little revelations from God. And these are just notes. You'll be driving along. I'm sure you have thoughts while you're driving to work, Marshall, that, man, you just got to stop and pull over, write them down, jot them down. And tonight I'm kind of working off of a bunch of stuff I pulled over one day and wrote down. So I'm kind of anxious to get into it. I initially wrote it as kind of like a practice sermon. So it wasn't necessarily, because it's like I talked to our pastor about, there is a difference between sermon writing and what we do here on a podcast, which, when I make notes for a podcast, it's for 2 or 3 way conversations. Well, sermon is meant to be taught. You have it's a different organizational skill to make out a sermon. So we'll see. We'll see how this works out.
No, it'll be good. And I want to share a story. So this was it last weekend? What is today? Monday? I think it was late last week. Maybe it's Thursday or Friday. I don't remember. Maybe it's Saturday. I don't know. Anyway, I was laying in our bed. My wife was in the kitchen doing some stuff, and I had some Christian music playing on my phone, sitting next to my pillow, just sitting there relaxing. This thought comes to my mind, and it wasn't the Lord speaking to me, because I've been able to experience that in my life, which is a huge blessing. But this wasn't necessarily the Lord speaking. It's a very beautiful thing, and this wasn't necessarily the Lord speaking to me, but so much more like God just putting a reassuring thought in my mind. But I knew it was from Him, like 100%. I knew it was from Him, because I just couldn't shake it, and I had to say it. I had to tell my wife. So I'm laying there, and I'm just sitting there, and it just I'm not listening to the music at this point, because this thought's just like going through my head and over and over and over. I'm like, okay, I gotta say this up. And I yelled out loud, I said, "Have faith. Everything's going to be okay." And she goes, "What?" I said, "Have faith. Everything's going to be okay." And then she started saying that, and she says, "I really like that. Like, I really, really like that." And so we had this chalkboard by our front door. We write little notes to each other. I'll write notes to her in the morning before I go to work and stuff, and vice versa. And so, so she wrote it up there, and it's still up there today. And we were both thinking about, because as you know, maybe some of our listeners know, we're trying to have a kid, right? We're trying to get pregnant and all that kind of stuff. And so we were both thinking that when we were talking about that. So whether it was for that or just life in general, but God was just like, "Hey, have faith. It's all going to be okay." So it was very reassuring, and maybe reassuring for our listeners. If you're going through something or dealing with something in your life, just have faith, because it's all going to be okay.
Yeah. And along those same lines, Marshall, having faith is, reminds me of something that I wanted to kind of get into you in more depth later in another episode, possibly. But, there's a lot of people, and I had this conversation the other night about, well, you might run into somebody that believes in God, but just can't get their mind wrapped around how the Trinity fits in, how they all operate together as one, and being one. And it is hard for our feeble minds to understand that. And where Jesus fits in the picture was the topic of what we were discussing. And that's what it is. What it all boils down to, and like I said, we'll get into this more in detail later, but what it all boils down to is, at the end of the day, you have to have faith. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, you just have to believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus is what bridges the gap between heaven and us here on earth. And I say that because Marshall, I've been hearing a lot here lately, between probably about 2 or 3 two sermons and a and another little podcast that I listened to about Jacob's ladder, or that stairway to heaven that,
Mm-hmm.
he's out in the wilderness, and he lays his head down on a rock, has this dream about the stairway from heaven to earth and angels up and down. And that's a foreshadowing of Jesus. That's what Jesus is he bridges that gap between heaven and earth, between us and the Father. So without him, there would be no way that we could come to the Father with our, we could not even come to God with our struggles, with our praises, whatever. It's because of Jesus in the flesh that we can do that. So, like I said, I didn't want to get too deep on that, but faith. You got to have faith.
No, yeah, and I've got a couple little paragraphs here to kind of bounce off of that. Is excuse me. It says faith in God has several components. The first is believing that He actually exists. However, simply believing that God exists is not enough. As James 2:19 says and
There you go.
explains, you believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. So the demons believe in God's existence as well. And it goes on to say, after acknowledging that God exists, the second element of faith in God is commitment. Faith that does not result in action is a dead faith, not true faith. So James 2:26 says, for as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. And it's like Aaron has faith in God and believes in God. And Aaron is having faith by going back to Bible college and working on becoming an ordained pastor, an ordained minister. And that's him showing that's an action. That's how I see that. That is an action of his faith in Christ. And anyway, I just thought that was really good. And this goes on and says a lot more. Maybe I'll say it later on.
Well, yeah, because I wanted to stop you there for a second. If you read, what was it? What were you reading? Where did you start there, Marshall?
The first one was James 2:19.
2:19. Okay. Well, coincidentally, I'm in the book of James for tonight's podcast. So,
Yep.
You believe that God is one, but you're willing to work. Okay, let's see here. Faith without good works is useless.
Was it the
Working
actions?
together with His works? Yeah. What was that again?
This is after acknowledging that God exists. The second element of faith in God is commitment. Faith does not result in action; is a dead faith, not true faith. It was James
Commitment.
2:26. Commitment.
That's what it was. That was the key word, was commitment.
Gotcha.
My amplified version kind of reads a little differently than yours, but I like the way that's why there's all these different translations are good, because mine didn't necessarily say that, but that's what you need, right? Is commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Commitment to your faith,
100%.
which leads me to what I was going to read tonight out of James chapter 1, verses 22 through 24. Or I'll probably go through. We'll start with that. But prove yourselves doers of the word, actively and continually obeying God's precepts, not merely listeners who hear the word but fail to internalize its meaning, deluding yourselves by unsound reasonings contrary to the truth. For if anyone who only listens to the word without obeying it, he is like a man who looks very carefully at his natural face in the mirror. For once he has looked at himself and gone away, he immediately forgets what he looked like.
Mm-hmm.
It takes commitment. You can't just show up to church every Sunday. And I've said this recently. You can't just show up to church on every Sunday and call yourself a Christian. You can't just simply do good works without believing in Jesus and call yourself a Christian.
Yeah.
It all works together. The faith, the good works, the belief in Jesus, that's the main point, all works together. You can't live in sin. You can't accept Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior, call yourself a Christian, and then turn around the next day and continue doing what you were doing before.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be committed.
100%. I mean, I've said this before. I see a big difference in my walk with Christ when I'm more committed to Him as opposed to when I'm, I guess you could say, a little bit more lazy. and not as committed to him.
Mm-hmm.
And that commitment kind of wraps it all up. It's just being committed. By being committed, you're going to have more faith. You're going to have that action of your faith. It's just all it's going to kind of just wrap it all up together. Yeah, no, that commitment it's got to be top priority.
Well, I have a few open-ended questions to pose here. You eat every day, right, Marshall? You don't eat just once a week. You change your clothes every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
You brush your teeth every day. You put deodorant on every day. So, while we're on this topic of commitment and committing to your faith and being doers of the word, then why don't you commune and interact? I'm not talking directly to you, Marshall. These are open-ended rhetorical questions that I jotted down, but that's kind of what I want the listeners to think about is why don't you? Why don't you then commune or interact or cultivate your relationship with Jesus every day?
Mm-hmm.
Any one of those, if you didn't do it every day, would make you dirtier each day you didn't do it, right? That's what sin does to us, is the more we aren't committed to our faith, the more that we aren't committed to Jesus, to living out, to being those doers of the word every day, sin makes us dirtier every day. That's what he means by to die to yourself, take up your cross each and every day, is to you're pretty much taking a spiritual bath every day.
Yeah. There's some good stuff in here I want to read. Let's see. I'm going to read the very end of this. So this is talking about, and there's previous paragraphs before this that kind of explains more things. So I'm just going to read the end paragraph here. It says, "The atheist likewise may come to his atheism by intuition or after careful deliberation. In the end, he has faith that God does not exist because he trusts either his instincts or his investigation and commits himself to live in a way that is consistent with his beliefs. Contrary to the claims of the new atheists, everyone has some kind of faith. Everyone trusts something. It is impossible to live without trusting in something, even if it is only in the reliability of our five senses. The object of our faith is what makes all the difference."
I've heard that put like that before. Yeah.
I've heard it. Just makes me think, like, if you're going to have faith in something, like it said, you got to trust something. You got to have faith in something. Atheist has faith in science and his knowledge of science. That's where they get their faith. Their faith is in science. Why not to put your faith in God? What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? Like,
exactly
nothing. You don't have anything to lose. Like, why not try it? Get a shot. See what happens. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and those of you that aren't daily seeking the Lord and you are spiritually dirty, maybe you cleaned up that one day. You went to church, okay? You left church and Monday rolls around. It's Monday rolls around and you hit a spiritual mud puddle. Now that filth is piled up. You got down and depressed. Something made you angry. You slipped up maybe or whatever. So that you're getting dirty now all week. Are you going to sit in that filth for the whole week? No, right? So we must die to ourselves daily, pick up our cross daily, stop feeding on the milk. And so if you eat salads once a week, Marshall, are you still you're gonna eventually wither and die, right? So you must seek the meat of God's word. Yes, we all start on milk. We start on milk when we're babies, and then we eventually get to eating regular food. That's how we should be spiritually. We should gradually and it should be a want of ours, especially after you accept Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior. You should want to cultivate that relationship. It's like take you and me, Marshall. Am I going to come up and just slap you every time I see you? No, I'm going to try and do my best to be your friend, to act as if a friend or a brother would act towards somebody. I'm not going to treat you like dirt every time I see you or every time I talk to you. So just as the same way as you change your clothes when you get dirty, the world we live in is very dirty. We're
Yep.
we're to strip off those these death clothes that we're in, and continually seek the clothes that Jesus offers. So Scripture also tells us to be in the world, but not of the world.
Hmm. That reminds me of when I went to, so when I accepted Christ, I was 13, 14 years old. And this youth event at a college in Tennessee, I can't remember. Actually, I found a VHS that has a video on it. I just don't have a VHS to play it. Um, so, but it, the title or the name of that week, it was called Not of This World. And
Yeah.
that whole week was all about not being of this world, but being of Christ, and being in the world, but not of the world. Um, big difference there. But yeah, no, I just brought that back. I was like, oh, I remember that. It was good times.
Yeah. What does that look like? What does that look like? So maybe, music comes to mind. Here lately, my life has changed to, I still like my rock. I still like my heavy metal and stuff like that. I don't listen to it near as much as I did.
Mm-hmm.
But, the way it transitioned for me was, I was listening to secular heavy metal. I was listening to secular rock, and then it turned into Christian rock. And now, what do we want to do? Is now all I want to do? I feel just as happy. I can work out. I never used to be able to work out to a worship song, but man, you you turn on, you turn on Yahweh will manifest Himself or Holy Forever, and I'll be cruising on down the sidewalk. I'll be pushing up to "Holy Are You Forever." It gets my blood pumping just to sit there, intentionally to have God on your mind
Mm-hmm.
all day long. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
Even though I'm walking through this world, I'm living my life, I still try and keep God on the forefront
Mm-hmm.
of my mind each and every day.
Yeah.
Praying, worshiping, whistling a song, uh, you know, whatever that looks like. If it's got God in it, then it's not a bad thing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when I go to the gym, on Spotify, I listen to, um, it's like heavy rock slash metal slash mosh pit music, but it's all Christian music. It's all Christian music. And it gets me
Mm-hmm.
fired up. I'm just like, oh yeah, I've got this. I'm just like getting all fired up. And sometimes it's like this calm worship music, and it gets my mindset into just it gets me into a completely different mindset. I just start thinking about God while I'm working out. And sometimes I'll
Yeah.
be walking on the treadmill. I just start praying. I'm just asking God to give me strength and all this kind of stuff. And we're just me and God working out together, um, working out our faith together. We're just sitting there doing our thing. Um, but
Yeah.
that's what I've always listened to is that kind of music. Like you said, I still listen to country music. Usually, I listen to mostly country and Christian music. That's pretty much how my whole life has been. Occasionally, I'll throw some other stuff in there, but it's usually one of those two. But it goes the same way with movies. I mean, you've got to be so careful with movies
Mm-hmm.
nowadays because there's so many hidden things. And a good, Christian movies. Last night, speaking of movies, Rabbit Trail. My wife and I watched The Hill. I think that's what it's called.
The Hill. I've never seen that.
It's a to me, I would say it's a faith based movie. Um, I don't recall there being any cussing in it or anything. Um, it's got Dennis Quaid in it. Dennis Quaid has gone pretty much doing all faith based movies now, for the most part.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay. All
yeah,
right.
yeah, he's in a lot of faith based movies, Christian movies, and so he was starring in this movie, but it's about he's a pastor in this movie, and his son has like these. He's got like these braces on his legs to help him walk.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, this guy ends up becoming. He's like this kid's like in love with baseball, and so like he just feels like that's his calling in his life is baseball, baseball, baseball. Um, And so, but
Yeah.
his dad, being this pastor, like this diehard pastor, like his dad was trying so hard to form his son and to push his son into his plan for his life, as opposed to letting God's
Mm-hmm.
plan happen in his son's life. Um, so it's a great movie. I advise people go see it, or I think it was on Netflix. We watched. I can't remember where it was, but it's a great movie. So yeah, you just gotta be careful what you watch out there, because what goes in comes out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's with anything, dirty jokes, uh,
Mm-hmm.
gossip. I mean,
Oh yeah.
me and you have talked about that before, Marshall, is that
Mm-hmm.
was something that we wanted to cover as a full on topic on the podcast, which what better time than any, but which I don't have any Bible verses to reference for that. But, it's just, how are you talking about other people? Are you
Yeah.
really reflecting Jesus in your conversations? Are you reflecting Jesus in your in what you watch and what you listen to? And let me tell you,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm no saint when it comes to especially movies. Now, I'm not necessarily watching a whole bunch of dirty movies, but I'm guilty of watching a shoot 'em up movie. I like John Wick. I like
Yeah.
Bad Boys and
Oh
Die
yeah.
Hard and whatever
Oh
you
yeah.
want to call it.
Yeah.
Rambo and
Oh,
so
we
yeah,
watch all that
I'm
stuff
just as
too.
guilty. but um, but does it edify me? No,
No.
not in the slightest.
Right. The thing I think what you got
Would
to
I be
do, and
better off? Yeah.
this is this is something that I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is something that my wife says a
No,
lot,
you're good.
um, and I'll mention is like we got to be careful what we listen to and what we watch on the TV and the movies and all that kind of stuff, because um, I guess this is the question you got to ask yourself: by watching this or listening to this, is it going to make me stumble or fall, or somebody else stumble and fall? Is it going to mess up someone's walk with
Right.
Christ? Is it going to make them fall down and mess up and fall into that sin that you're watching on the movie, you're hearing on the radio? If you're listening to rap music and it's just a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of rap crap where they're cussing and saying all this dirty stuff, is that going to make your friend over here who may struggle with that stuff and you know it and you turn it on? Is that going to make them stumble and fall? So I think that's the kind of question you got to ask yourself when you're watching this kind of stuff and who you're watching it with, because it may not affect you. It may not make you stumble. It may not bother you at all whatsoever. You can watch it. Life goes on. You're cool. But the other person that's watching it with you, maybe not so much. So that's kind of the
Yeah.
conversation my wife and I have sometimes when we're watching movies and stuff like that.
It's like drinking a
But
beer outside of an AA meeting.
like,
Seriously, that's what it's like.
yeah, no, I know it really is. It's like sitting outside with a cooler full of ice down beers and people walking out and say, "Hey, what a cold one!" It's like, are you kidding me right now? Like,
Yeah,
what's wrong with you?
exactly.
Oh, that's funny.
So I guess what we're getting at here is those of you who say you believe in Jesus, you got to ask yourself the question: do you, or do you really believe? And if it's yes, then why don't you show it through the way that you live? And you know where I'm going, Marshall, is the fruits of the Spirit. If you can exemplify those in your life, that love, that joy, that peace, the patience, the kindness, the self-control, then Jesus shines through you. I guess that's the bottom line, is just let Jesus shine through you. And think about it. I think self-control is a big deal there. Can you be self-controlled enough to control all these factors that we've just discussed?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if you can't, then think about it before you get into
Man,
it.
we all need work. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Every single one of us, no matter how long you've been a Christian, no matter how far into your Christian walk you are, and then that's a very, very dangerous place to be, is when you're a Christian person and you think that you're just all high and mighty and you are, all things about God and all this and all that, and you're just learning. Because, I've seen before in my life where people who are like on fire with God or on fire for God, and they get real cocky in their faith because they think that they're just the bee's knees and all that in a bag of chips going back to the 90s.
Right.
You're just the coolest thing to walk
Yeah.
the face of the earth because I'm a big Christian. I know. And you got to be careful with that because none of us are perfect. Even as Christians, you sin, you mess up, you screw up all the time. Um, and you don't know everything. That's what
Yeah.
your faith walk is all about. I mean, you are constantly learning something. God is constantly teaching us something if you're open to hearing Him. But I think when you get to the point where you're like, nah, I know it all, you really shut God off. You shut Him off and you shut Him down out of your life, and then it becomes a really dangerous place to be
Well,
in. Just gotta be careful.
it's a classical tactic of the evil one is
Yeah.
pride.
Oh yeah.
Pride.
Yep.
And that's we're hearing a lot about that right now in this month.
Mm-hmm.
That's pride is of the devil.
Yeah. Oh
Don't be
yeah.
too prideful. Jesus calls us to be humble servants.
Yes, absolutely. You brought up the pride thing, and I shared a post on Facebook recently, and it had to do with gay pride, and it had to do with that.
Yeah.
And it was a Christian post, and it was about gay pride, and it was more or less saying if we would put, I can't remember what it says. I don't want to misquote it, but it's like I can't remember. I have to look it up and see. But anyway, I shared it, and I knew that when I shared that post that it was going to ruffle feathers, and I had a pretty good idea as to whose
Mm-hmm.
feathers it was going to ruffle because I know people who are gay who struggle with that sin, whether they know it or not. And look, if that's where you're at in your life and that's what you're dealing with, that's your sin. That's your sin. I don't judge you for it. I don't hate you for it. I'm not going to love you any less because of it. I'm going to treat you and love you just like I do
Yeah,
anybody else. And I don't always act like that. I'll admit I
for
don't always
sure.
say things like that. I'll admit that too. Um, but I'm 100% guilty of that kind of stuff. However, it ruffled some feathers and it spurred a conversation here. It says, this is what the post said. It said, maybe if we spent a month celebrating God instead of celebrating sin, our nation would see revival and God's blessings. Which is very true.
Mm-hmm.
100% true. It's a very in your face, slap you across the face kind of a post. Um, but that's just how I am sometimes, and I really don't care.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make you mad, but you know what? God's truth and God's word is very in your face sometimes,
Sometimes
and
the
it's going
truth
to be stuff
hurts.
that sometimes the truth hurts. I mean, look at Jesus and the Pharisees and all these people. I mean, he came around and spoken truth, and it rubbed in the wrong way and ruffled their feathers, and look what happened. So
Yep.
hey, yeah, gotta do what you gotta do. Anyway,
Well, and it's pride is as much of a sin as anything else, and don't think
absolutely.
for any second that Christians are immune to that as well. And that's where I was going with that, Marshall, was that fact that new Christians and people that have been even a believer for a long time can get prideful.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
everybody has to be mindful uh, of that because
yeah.
it can get in the way real quick and it sets in real quick.
I remember one time back when I was working out real heavily and trying to get bulk and everything, and I was working out with a guy. This guy he was a pretty beefy dude, and he knew a bit more about working out than I did. Um, but that's part of the reason I wanted. I mean, he was a friend, but that's also why I wanted to work out because he knew more than I did, so I wanted to learn from him. But something he always told me, he said, "Don't ever get you see some guys in the gym. I say guys because usually it's men. You see a lot
Yeah,
of men in the
yeah.
gym who just they're ripped and they're chiseled. And they look good, like they got nice bodies. I'm like, I wish I looked
They
like that.
walking around like that.
And walking around like they're Arnold, but they're very cocky and very full of themselves, and they have a lot of pride.
Yeah,
And he told me, he said, don't ever get to the point where you just got so much pride, you're just so cocky. He said, always be humble and always just be
yeah,
yourself. He said, no matter how big you get, always stay humble and always don't get prideful, don't get cocky, because when you do, you turn into that guy that not so many people like. And it's the same way with being a Christian. When you get so cocky and prideful, being a Christian, people begin to not like you, and you begin to push more people away than draw them closer to Christ.
Exactly.
It's very easy to do. That's why you got to be careful. It's a tightrope you're walking. So
it is. There was something I was thinking about while you were talking there about, about being prideful, and I kind of lost it. It escaped me. But, it's now I'm trying to think of it. It's gone. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. It's gone. Either way, but another thing we've kind of touched on this episode is the fact is community, is weaknesses and such, and where I'm weak in some areas, where I'm not perfect in some areas, there you're better in some areas than I am, or you're stronger in the faith in some areas. That's why community and who you surround yourselves with is such an important deal too. And that falls right in line with what we were talking about tonight. In my opinion, and it falls right in line with what you're watching, what you're doing, what you're, all of that is also who you surround yourself with. If you have become a believer and then you go and surround yourself with the same people that you're hanging with before Christ, there's a likelihood that you're going to fall right back into the same sin that you were dying to in the first place. So surround yourself with other believers, with the other community believers, so that you can strengthen each other. We're all one big happy family, and we're all here to help each other. That's what we're doing here on this podcast.
Yeah. No, yeah, 100%. I mean, it's just like bling, there goes the ring. It's just like
playing with it.
It's like what kind of falls into that is like having an accountability partner. I think that's important in your life too, regardless of what you need accountability for. It could be you just need accountability staying in the Word or praying every day, or it could be an addiction you have or some sort of struggle. It doesn't matter. But it's very important to have in that community an accountability partner. I've had a lot of accountability partners. Aaron is my accountability partner in my life right now, and I love it, and I'm thankful for it. And the same goes with him. I'm his, whatever it may be, and so it ties into, having a faith family around you, because, if you're surrounding yourself with people who aren't of the same faith or don't believe in God at all, it's going to make your walk a lot harder, and they may pull you away from God.
Yeah.
As opposed to pushing you closer to Him.
Mm-hmm. I remembered what I was going to say earlier about pride while we were on the topic of pride. I know we've moved on, but, that's the thing. The world's going to tell you, and life, everybody in it, we've heard from since we were growing up, that what pride does, being prideful, have pride in what you do, and humbleness is taken as weakness to the world. Not so much. That's what Jesus has taught us as we've grown in our faith, that being humble doesn't equate to weakness. But the world's going to tell you that if you're not prideful, you're weak.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you can watch a lot of these big action stars.
I was going to say, we just work out a different gym.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. But yeah, you see a lot of people, boosting pride. And you got to have pride in yourself. You got to have pride in your job. You got to have pride in what you do. You got to have pride. And it's like, I get where they're coming from. Like, you want to take pride in what you do, like you want to be proud of it. Like you want to do a good job at what you're doing, whatever it may be. There's nothing wrong with doing a good job, but when you start becoming prideful about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and that pride turns into I'm better than, or I'm the greatest, or I'm cocky, or whatever it is, that's where the problem lies. I think that's where the sin lies.
Yeah.
You start,
I think,
I don't know.
Yeah. I think what it boils down to is instead of being prideful, be thankful. Be thankful for God's providential care, for His provisions in your life, for providing you that job, for providing you that food, you didn't make that money. Yeah. Your body went out and did it, but God gave you those abilities to go out and do that, whatever that may be.
Yep.
He gave you those abilities to go out and make that money. He gave you that strength to go out and get that strong. Look at Samson. Yeah, that's another story. God has given us all these things in His Word, all these different life situations we can relate back to His Word. It's all these stories and such, and there's people that think that they're just stories. They're applications.
Yeah. They're applications, and
So
something happened at some point in time.
yeah, but well, hey, I think we have managed to ramble on for a full episode. That surprises me, and it doesn't, all at the same time.
You and I are good at going off the cuff when it comes to our podcast. I'm not trying to be prideful.
Exactly. Hey, talk about pride,
Yeah. Right? Yeah. See how easy it is? See, now it's just an example, guys. Right. Just an example. This is an example. Oh, hey, that's funny. I love it. See, no, that's just how we round it off. That's
but you're right.
End the podcast right there. No, it's fun. I think we have the most fun.
We do, and some of our best conversations. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, guys. Those of you listening, our best conversations are mainly done over the phone, but and sometimes we get lucky enough to have to recreate those conversations here on this podcast. But some of them happen in private. Or a lot of them happen in private. Yeah. So, when you let the Holy Spirit just guide guide what you're talking about, and it helps. Just like what we've been talking about on this whole podcast is when you have these conversations on a daily basis, and that's what you crave is godly conversations on the norm, then it's natural. Then you don't have to have talking points. You don't have to have notes. It's just, this is how we talk on a daily basis. Everything relates back to God. Then that gets pretty easy. That's not cockiness. That's just the way it is. That's just life. Life as a Jesus follower, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, 100%.
So, all right, man. Well, I love it. Yeah, you wanna end this thing?
Let's end it. It's been fun.
All right,
but let's end it.
Yeah. You guys. I mean, I didn't think that we'd end up with almost an hour's worth of talking points, but here we are. So of content, yeah, right. All right, guys. Hey, thanks for listening to Undaunted Pursuit podcast and this episode this week. For one, I don't know what the name of this is going to be. I don't know what kind of music I'm putting at the end of this. You know what, I do kind of know. And Zach Tyndall, it didn't work in last week's episode. So Zach Tyndall put out a new song, Romans 6, I believe is the name of it. Either way, it'll be in the show notes below. It's a nice, just it's kind of a little different than what he's been doing. So, enjoy it and follow him.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of great songs, and I'm real happy to see him coming out with more because I know he's a very busy guy. And I know it's hard for him to get new music out there. So if you guys can support him in any way, please, by all means, go and follow him and show your support any way you can. And as usual, guys, if you guys share this episode with somebody this week, and we'd love to hear from you. Mail at undauntedpursuit.com or undauntedpursuit@gmail.com. You guys can message us there, send us an email, whatever you guys want to do. We would love to hear from you. So, Marshall, what else we got?
Well, you guys can always follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and the list goes on and on. Guys, seriously, we're on all of those platforms. X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. It's silly. All the platforms around there, you guys can reach out to us there. Thing, yeah, follow, subscribe. YouTube, we have YouTube little clips now on there. We got tons of recordings from our podcast on there. So go listen to that, subscribe, follow. Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, all that good stuff. Like, subscribe, follow, all that stuff. It helps get this podcast out there, pushes us out. Just enjoy it, guys. We really love you guys, and we appreciate y'all for listening to us and for being a part of this journey with us. It's been a long journey so far. We're looking forward to see what God's going to do in the coming future. So thank y'all. Y'all are awesome.
Yeah. And, did you say rate and review? Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you guys need to make sure you give us a good rating and review. Yeah. I can't remember if you said all that. We've kind of got a rhythm going here on this podcast where we just kind of go back and forth. You cover social medias, I cover the, whatever, but anything else that I happen to think of when towards the end of this podcast, I don't know, but
that's true. That's true. We've got it going on. So yeah, it's good stuff.
That's right.
Y'all are awesome.
So, yep. We'll see y'all next week on Undaunted Pursuit podcast. See you guys.
Adios.
He's calling us to trust. He's calling us to trust. I became dead to sin when I died with Christ. I was raised with Him for a righteous life, and now the old has gone, and I'm new inside. Oh, I was changed when I let go of my life. Died for us, so those of us who could live to give it all. While He was on that cross, He gave it all for us. He's calling us to trust. He's calling us to trust. I became